welcome to PM Express tonight. You've watched it all day. You've listened to it on Joy FM and myjoyonline.com. Let's talk about it a bit more. The school placement for sale, fixing a broken system. That's what we're going to be talking about, focusing a bit more on the solutions to this particular problem. And why is this important? Because there's so many very underprivileged people across the country who want their children to simply go to school, right? They struggle to get them up onto the junior high school level. They finish, and they're now being asked to pay just so their children get into the senior high school. This, many say, defeats the whole purpose of the free SHS program. And that's why this is such a critical matter. Once it affects you, it affects all of us. 8 persons have so far been arrested. Suspects were found to have links, we understand, with the education ministry. So one of the key things that had emerged since this whole story broke is precisely that. Now, if you remember, the computerized system was introduced so that it will eliminate corruption in the placement process, because before this, the computer wasn't involved. So human beings were determining where your children will go to school. And because of that, there was a lot of errors, but also manipulation. That's why they introduced it. The protocol system then was also introduced, right? It used to be 30% quota for communities within the catchment area of the school. And then this, when the protocol came in, the protocol system was now 10%, but shared equally between the Ministry of Education and the schools, right? And this is what the Fourth Estate investigators found. You just watched a documentary just a short while ago. They found that 10% quota system apparently is what is being abused. So for some of the students who got admitted to originally to a PAM senior high school, for example, the parents who could afford were now getting them to go to a grade 8 school like Infantiman. And then the people were now taking advantage of that process and asking them to pay monies to place them, $7,500. Now, the key question to ask yourself is, so if this person got admission to a PAM senior high school, and somebody also, by the way, also got admission into Infantiman, because there are a finite number of places in Infantiman, this person that pays $7,500 will take the place of somebody in Infantiman. What happens to the person who actually qualified and was placed without any interference, without any influence, without any inducement to Infantiman? What happens to that person? That's the big unknown, and that's why this conversation is important. People were paying as much as 11 to 20,000 cedis just to get their children into the Wesley Girls Senior High School, Wegehe. That is why this is a critical matter to look at. And then we found also that in 2022, the ministry ordered an internal investigations into this, because this is not the first time it's come up. In fact, this was supposed to have commenced on 21st of June 2022 and ended on 29th of July 2022. The question to ask is, what happened of that internal investigation? Because a committee was put together under the authority of the minister to look into this. If that had happened, Manasseh and the Fourth Estate would not have found the need to do this particular probe. So we'll get to the heart of what happened to that investigations. But the immediate past Director General of the GES was the first to blow the whistle on this and asked the CID and the National Investigations Bureau to look into the matter, former BNI, to look at, because he found that the system was being manipulated. People were being asked to pay monies. It's now become cash and carry when it wasn't supposed to be so. The real reason why they were introducing placement system was to take that out of the equation. And so he filed the report and asked the CID and the NIB to look into this particular matter. Again, what happened after that investigations was launched by the CID? It's anybody's guess. In that documentary, you found what happened. Manasseh and his team found that some, big individuals got intervened in the matter, and the CID went nowhere with it. The education minister has spoken to them, and he says his goal is to ensure placement is fair and based on merit, and that the corruption in the system is dealt with, and that he is willing to get the agencies involved to investigate the matter properly and get to the bottom of this. But it's a fair question to ask. In 2020, when he set up that committee, that was precisely to deal with this matter. Why didn't that committee do its job? And did that committee submit its report on the 29th of July? We'll get into that. And what did the minister do once that report, assuming that report was finalized and brought to him, what did he do about it? And as you know, individuals were mentioned, top people, including, the people in the education ministry have been mentioned. So the CID was involved. But I'm pretty sure you've heard Manasseh in that report also mentioned, and his team had mentioned, that when it comes to the grade A schools like Infantiman, like Wegehe, only 2 people had the authority and had the access to change the admissions. And that was the education minister himself and Professor Opoku Abankwah, the former director general. And so one of them, the assumption is one of them would have been in the know, because they were the only 2 people with access, with the clearance to make the changes. But as you heard in that documentary, the investigators managed to pay monies to get their, the person that they were paying the money for, the school changed to a grade A school. So if it is not him, it could have been him. And so the point is, it's very easy to find this out, right? He had filed a CID report. He had asked for an internal investigation into the matter. So who did? We'll get into that when we sit down with my guests. They're joining me to have a conversation. We must find a solution to this. The ministry today had made some commitments. We must hold them to it. Commitments have been made in the past, and we went nowhere with it. Let's see if this is the final time we'll have a conversation about corruption in the computer placement system. Join me after the break when my guests are seated.